I lie about my age. This is a true statement. I claim to be younger than I actually am. This is also a true statement. So, how old do you think I am? How old do you think I am? Raise your hand if you think I'm over 70 years old. Well, a lot of you out there, some of you out there anyway, have known me since I got into the storytelling community. Sue Hinkle, I'm looking at you, Karen Botts, Aaron Stiefel. That was in the early 1980s. And I was a grandfather at that time. Wow. So do the math. If I was a grandfather 40 years ago, I'm pretty much bound to be older than 70, right? How about 80? Would you say I'm over 80? Yeah. Anybody want to go for 90? Well, a few. Would say over 100. Well, most of you think I'm over 80. Some of you think I might be over 90. Karen thinks I might be over 100. Goes to show you, you see what you think you're going to see. So how old am I really? Would you believe 763? I didn't think so. But why not? Methuselah lived to be 969. In fact, there are at least 8 biblical patriarchs remembered by name for having lived more than 900 years. And many more that have lived for multiple hundreds. Similar stories are heard in other cultures all around the world. So what are we to make of this? Well, there have been a lot of explanations attempted for saying that somehow or other they counted years differently back then. This is all oral tradition, and ages just got exaggerated as the stories are retold. Oh, come on. Would storytellers lie? Why not consider the simplest explanation? That there are now, and always have been, a small number of people who have lived far longer than ordinary people. In ancient times, these people were considered to be blessed by God and were honored and remembered in song and story. But later on, people began to get suspicious of people who didn't seem to get any older. They started doing things like saying they must be in league with the devil. So we had to learn to conceal our true ages by living apart, by moving from place to place, by disguise, misdirection, and lying about our age. Long life is a perfectly normal, if rare, genetic capability, which enhances the body's ability to repair itself. As near as we can tell, this capability arose somewhere in northeastern Africa. Thousands and thousands of years ago, back when the Sahara was still green, with the mutation of a single gene The mutation was conserved through inbreeding in a small and isolated population. And since it seems to follow Mendelian genetics, we can infer that within a few generations, half of the members of this tribe would have inherited a copy of the long life gene and would be having lifespans on the order of 200 to 300 years. And maybe 1 in 4 would have inherited 2 copies of the gene, one from each parent, which gave them the capability of living much longer, 600, 900, 1,000 years. In time, this rather unusual tribe came to dominate rising civilization in the Nile River Valley and founded the first dynasty of Egyptian pharaohs. Some of these rulers ruled literally for hundreds of years. It's no wonder that their subjects regarded them and worshiped them as gods. Their names endure to this day in Egyptian mythology: Osiris, Isis, Horus. This dynasty began the practice of sibling marriage to ensure that the next generation would inherit 2 copies of the long life gene and the capability for living close to 1,000 years. The practice of sibling marriage was continued to be practiced among Egyptian pharaonic lines right up to the time of Cleopatra, although the original reason for it had long been forgotten. With all the riches of Egypt at their command and a better understanding of biological science than we give them credit for, these people developed a process of rejuvenation in order to extend the lives of their siblings that had only inherited 1 copy of the gene. This process restores an aging body to youthful vigor. And in the case of women, restores the ability to conceive and bear children. This is the probable explanation of cases like Sarah, the wife of Abraham, who reportedly bore a child when she was 90 years old. Of course, in time, eventually, this first dynasty was overthrown and driven out of Egypt. The new rulers attempted to use the rejuvenation process to extend their own lives, but of course, lacking the critical gene, it didn't work. This, however, evolved into the process of mummification, which also continued to be practiced in Egypt for hundreds of years, right up to the time of Cleopatra and beyond. Getting back to the question of my age, I married outside the clan, as most of my colleagues have done, and chose to allow myself to grow old along with my spouse. Now that she's passed on, I have to consider applying for rejuvenation. I don't look forward to it. I've been through it 3 times already, and it gets harder every time. But if it goes well, I'll come out looking like my grandson. Except that my actual grandsons are all 6.5 feet tall. And I'll still be stuck down here at barely 5.5, which I assure you was a good height for a man 750 years ago. But you won't get to see it. I'll be living somewhere else with a new identity and a plausible backstory. But I'll still be lying about my age.